The night sky over Romagon shimmered with the distant glow of stars. The colony, nestled in the emerald valleys of Joraz, had long been a peaceful sanctuary for humans seeking a new beginning among the cosmos. Beneath the glass dome of a modest home, Jimmy Leo, an 8-year-old boy with wide, curious eyes, sat cross-legged on his bed, tracing constellations with his finger against the transparent ceiling. His father, Captain Mark Leo, watched him from the doorway, a warm smile softening the hardened lines of his face. He had seen war, felt its weight, but here on this tranquil world, he had found something he never thought possible: peace. "Still watching the stars, buddy?" Mark asked, stepping closer. Jimmy nodded, his voice tinged with awe. "Do you think there are other people out there watching us too?" Mark hesitated before sitting beside him. "Maybe," he said, tousling his son's hair. "But no matter who's out there, Earth always protects its own." Jimmy's small fingers curled around the fabric of Mark's uniform. "You'll keep me safe, right, Dad?" "Always." The soft hum of the colony's security drones patrolling outside was reassuring. Everything about Romagon exuded safety, order, an oasis far from the reach of war. The Galactic Empire loomed beyond human territory, but they had no reason to come here. No threats, no disputes, just families carving out a future. Mark tucked Jimmy under the blankets, pressing a light kiss to his forehead before standing. "Sleep tight, kiddo." Jimmy smiled sleepily. "Night, Dad." Mark turned off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air. The artificial lights of the colony cast long shadows on the ground, and the scent of blooming Lysara flowers drifted through the air. He stretched, gazing at the stars, then frowned. A deep, unnatural rumble shuddered through the sky. Mark stiffened. The hairs on his arms stood on end. The security drones, usually silent, began to emit an urgent red glow. A low-frequency alarm pulsed through the colony, a sound he hadn't heard since his days in the Earth Defense Force. Then, the sky split apart. A massive warship, black and angular, burst from hyperspace above Romagon, blocking out the stars. Smaller vessels fanned out like predators, their metallic hulls reflecting the colony's artificial lights. The ground beneath Mark trembled as the colony's automated defenses kicked in, energy cannons emerging from hidden platforms. But it was already too late. The first strike came like a spear of fire. A brilliant blue beam lanced from the warship's underbelly, piercing the central power station. A second later, the colony plunged into darkness. Panic ignited. Sirens wailed. People spilled into the streets, their voices shrill with confusion. Mark's heart pounded as he sprinted toward his home, every muscle in his body screaming, "Run, run, run." Another explosion, closer this time. A column of fire erupted from a nearby building, flinging debris into the air. The scent of burning metal and scorched flesh filled Mark's nostrils as he turned the corner to his house. Then he saw them. Imperial war droids, 7 feet tall, matte black, their red visor slits glowing like the eyes of death itself. They moved in unison, advancing through the colony with chilling precision. Behind them, armored Imperial troops, their sleek gray uniforms bearing the insignia of the Galactic Empire, marched forward like an unstoppable tide. Mark's instincts took over. He ducked behind an overturned transport, hands shaking as he reached for his old sidearm, a relic from his military days. It wasn't much, but it was something. His mind screamed for one thing: Jimmy. His home was just ahead, its doorway still intact. He broke into a desperate sprint, dodging the growing carnage around him. A woman shrieked nearby before her voice was silenced by the cold crack of a plasma rifle. A father shielded his daughter behind a supply crate before an Imperial soldier shot him in the back. Mark didn't stop. Couldn't. He reached the door and slammed his hand against the control panel. Nothing. The power was out. With a snarl, he kicked it in, the metal groaning as it buckled under his strength. "Jimmy," he roared. Silence. No, wait. A small sound, whimpering from under the bed. Mark lunged inside, dropping to his knees. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "We have to go, right now." Jimmy crawled out, eyes brimming with tears. He clutched his father's uniform, burying his face into Mark's chest. "I'm scared." "I know, kiddo," Mark rasped, lifting him into his arms. "But I've got you. I promise." Then the wall exploded. The force sent them both sprawling. Mark's ears rang, his vision swimming. He barely had time to process before heavy boots thudded against the floor. A towering figure stepped through the smoke. Darthan Velker, an Imperial commander, his face obscured by an ornate silver mask. His presence alone exuded authority, cruelty. Mark's grip on his son tightened. Velker scanned the room, his voice calm, almost bored. "Search the area. Kill any stragglers." Soldiers fanned out, stepping over Mark as if he were already dead. He forced himself still, holding Jimmy close, his heart thunderous in his chest. Then Velker turned his gaze directly toward them. Mark's breath caught. Velker tilted his head, eyes narrowing beneath the mask. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. "You were hiding," he murmured. "How predictable." Jimmy whimpered softly, and Velker's gaze snapped to him. "A child?" His voice was laced with mild surprise, then something darker, amusement. Mark moved on instinct. He lunged, shoving Jimmy behind him, drawing his pistol. But before he could even aim, a searing blue blast struck his side. Pain, blinding electric, racked his body. He hit the ground hard, choking on the acrid scent of burning flesh. Jimmy screamed. Mark tried to move, but his limbs wouldn't obey. His vision blurred, breath ragged. Velker loomed over Jimmy now, one gloved hand raising a sleek plasma pistol. Jimmy looked up at him, small, trembling, but defiant. Velker exhaled, slow and deliberate. So fragile, he mused. Mark tried to speak, to beg, to do something. Velker pulled the trigger. A single shot. Jimmy crumpled. For a moment, the world stood still. Then, Mark screamed. A sound so raw, so utterly broken, that even the soldiers hesitated. Velker, without a second glance, turned to his men. "Burn the colony. Leave nothing." Mark could only watch, his vision tunneling, as Jimmy's small, lifeless body lay in the cold dust. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the transmission reached Earth, and humanity's wrath was unleashed. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the holographic display flickering above the war table. The image was frozen, an Imperial soldier standing over the lifeless body of a child. Jimmy Leo. His wide, terrified eyes were burned into the minds of every high-ranking officer in the Earth Defense Force. No one spoke. No one moved. Then General Alexander Graves broke the silence. "They think we're weak," he said, his voice the slow, deliberate growl. His hands were curled into fists, knuckles pale. "They think humanity will roll over, that we'll grieve quietly, bury our dead, and accept our fate." His cold blue eyes swept the room, locking onto each commander, each admiral, each officer who had gathered in this war council. Men who had fought in skirmishes, men who had planned defensive strategies for the survival of humanity. Never had they considered full-scale war. Until now. Graves exhaled, controlled but seething. "They don't know us at all." Around the room, silent rage burned. Admiral James Holloway, head of the First Fleet, leaned forward, his jaw clenched. "They slaughtered civilians," he said, his voice low with fury. "A child. In cold blood. A declaration of war," added Commander Nathan Noah, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "One they think we won't answer." "They're wrong." Graves tapped a control on his wrist console. The hologram shifted, revealing a detailed strategic map of Imperial Outpost Z-17. "We strike back. Hard. No half measures. No diplomacy." This is not a battle for survival. This is a battle for vengeance. The plan was laid out with ruthless efficiency. Outpost Z-17 was a vital Imperial supply hub, lightly guarded, but strategically critical. The perfect target for the first blow. They would strike from the shadows, cripple the Empire's logistics, and show them that humanity did not forget, that humanity did not forgive. The fleet mobilized within hours. Warships, sleek and deadly, slid from their orbital docks. The EDF First Fleet, once built only as a deterrent, now carried the full weight of Earth's fury. Within the fleet, inside the leading destroyer Iron Requiem, Noah stood on the bridge, arms locked behind his back. The countdown to the attack ticked away in the corner of his display. 1 minute. All ships in position. Holloway's voice crackled over the comms. Stealth shields holding, reported the weapons officer. They don't see us. Noah's eyes stayed fixed on the Imperial station ahead. He could picture the soldiers inside, complacent, unaware, laughing in their barracks, drinking in the mess halls, never expecting retribution. They were about to learn. Drop stealth, Noah ordered. Open fire. Space erupted. Torpedoes streaked through the void, leaving trails of white fire. Energy cannons ripped through the station's defenses before the Imperials could even sound the alarm. A dozen enemy ships tried to scramble from the docking bays. EDF strike fighters cut them down before they could escape. Within minutes, the station was engulfed in flames. Noah led the ground assault personally. Black Reaper squads, Earth's most lethal operatives, stormed the outpost with brutal precision. The Imperials fought back briefly. They were unprepared for the sheer savagery of human vengeance. One by one, the defenders fell. A wounded Imperial officer, crawling for his weapon, looked up to see Noah standing over him, rifle raised. He wheezed, blood dribbling from his lips. You fight like animals?" Noah's finger tightened on the trigger. His voice was cold. "No, we fight like humans." A single shot. The Imperial slumped. The mission was complete. The first of many. But the war was just beginning. Across the galaxy, the Empire reeled. The destruction of Outpost Z-17 sent shockwaves through the Imperial Senate. Reports of the massacre, of the precision and merciless efficiency of the attack, left hardened Imperial commanders speechless. The High Chancellor Zorvan stood at the center of the Senate chamber, watching the uncut battle footage. The EDF fleet appearing out of the void, the silent, chilling way they executed Imperial soldiers. He turned to his war council. "And you said they were weak?" A murmur of uncertainty rippled through the room. At the far end of the chamber, Darton Velker stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Unlike the others, he was not shaken. If anything, a flicker of amusement crossed his features. Predictable, he mused. They are emotional, reckless. A wounded animal thrashes before it dies. Zorvan's expression darkened. They just burned an Imperial station to the ground. If they are wounded, they are far from dying. Velker smirked. Then we crushed them before they spread further. Zorvan studied him for a long moment. "You seem unconcerned." Velker stepped forward. "Because this is an opportunity." His voice was smooth, dangerous. "Humanity does not yet understand true war. They still believe in honor, in justice." He chuckled low and knowing. "We will teach them the cost of defiance." The order was given. The Imperial fleet moved. In the dark void of Titan's Veil, an asteroid belt rich with strategic outposts, the EDF's Second Fleet lay in wait. Admiral Holloway paced the command deck of his flagship, dauntless, his sharp eyes locked onto the tactical display. "They're coming," muttered his second-in-command. Holloway exhaled, his mind sharpening. "Let them." On the screen, the Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace. 30 capital ships, their hulking forms dwarfing the human warships. But Holloway was not concerned with size. The Empire believed in brute force. Humans? They believed in precision. "Activate the net," Holloway ordered. The trap sprang shut. Hidden within the asteroid field, AI-guided mines detonated in synchronized waves, shredding the lead Imperial ships before they could react. EDF warships weaved between the asteroids, firing from angles the Empire had never trained against. Imperial formations fractured. The battle turned into a slaughter. On board his flagship, Velker's expression shifted. He had underestimated them. He watched as his reinforcements were obliterated, as human ships moved too fast, too efficiently. Then came the transmission. The holoscreen flickered to life, and General Graves appeared, his face carved from stone. "You murdered a child," he said, his voice cold as the void. "We will show no mercy." Then the EDF fleet unleashed hell. Velker barely escaped with his life. The Empire's forces obliterated. The war was no longer a question of human survival. It was a question of how long the Empire could survive Earth's wrath. The stars above Kazari Prime burned a deep red, their light bleeding across the sky like an open wound. The world, once a proud jewel in the Galactic Empire's vast dominion, was now under siege. Earth's war machine had arrived, and with it, the promise of vengeance. Inside the Imperial War Command bunker, Grand Strategist Kale Zorn stood rigid, his silver military insignia glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. He stared at the holomap projected before him, the grim truth glaring back at him in blinking red markers. Earth's forces had breached the outer defenses. His grip on the edge of the console tightened. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humanity was supposed to be a minor nuisance, a backwater species that would crumble under the Empire's overwhelming might. But in every battle since the war had begun, the humans had defied logic. They didn't fight like the alien races the Empire had conquered before. They adapted, learned, retaliated with a precision that unsettled even the most seasoned Imperial officers. A sharp buzz from the comm unit broke his thoughts. The voice on the other end was frantic. "Sir, the human ground forces, they're inside the city. The Black Reapers have breached the Palace District." Zorn's blood ran cold. The Black Reapers, humanity's elite special forces. Ghosts on the battlefield. If they had reached the palace, it meant one thing. They had come for him. Before he could react, the bunker lights flickered, then died. A heartbeat later, the dull whine of jamming technology filled the air. Communications had been severed. Zorn turned, pulse pounding, reaching for the sidearm at his hip. Then, the doors exploded inward. Smoke and debris clouded the air as shadows moved through the dust. Silent, efficient, predators. Zorn fired blindly. Once, twice. The third shot never came. His hand was wrenched to the side, a blade slicing through the tendons of his wrist. He screamed, stumbling backward. A dark figure loomed over him, his form obscured by a sleek black exosuit. Commander Nathan Noah. The human warrior's voice was ice. "Kale Zorn." Zorn clutched his bleeding wrist, his breath ragged. You don't understand," he gasped. "The Empire is eternal. Your people can't." Noah's blade hovered an inch from his throat. "Your empire is dying," he said, voice measured, calm. "And you're going to help us finish it." Zorn gritted his teeth, blood pooling at his feet. "I will never betray the High Chancellor." Noah's eyes, void of mercy, studied him for a long moment. "Then you're useless to me." The blade flashed. When the transmission reached the Empire, it was broadcasted uncut. Every Imperial world, every officer, every citizen, they all saw it. Zorn, once the brilliant mind behind the Empire's war doctrine, his lifeless body slumped over his own war table. It was not just a kill. It was a statement. Earth had come, and they were not leaving until the Empire was dust. From the towering citadel of Valarn 6, Darthan Velker watched the transmission in silence. The flames of war burned brighter than ever, and yet a strange calm settled over him. He had underestimated humanity, but that was not a mistake he intended to repeat. "They're making fools of us," said Admiral Xeris, his face twisted in frustration. "Zorn was one of our finest. The people are losing faith." Velker exhaled through his nose unshaken. "Let them fear," he murmured. "Fear breeds obedience." Xeris scoffed. "It also breeds rebellion. The outer colonies are already rioting, Velker. This war was supposed to be over months ago." Velker's lips curled in amusement. "Then perhaps it is time to remind them why we rule." The Admiral hesitated. "What are you suggesting?" Velker turned to face him fully. "We've been fighting this war on their terms. They take a world, we defend. They attack, we react. That changes now." He walked toward the command panel, fingers gliding over the surface until a single classified file appeared on the holo display. Operation Silent Dagger. The Admiral's face paled. You're actually considering?" Velker smiled. "The humans fight with righteous fury. Let's see how they fight when their home is reduced to ashes." The Earth Defense Fleet moved with relentless precision, pushing the Imperial forces back systematically, ruthlessly. From the bridge of the Titan-class Dreadnought Vanguard, Admiral Holloway surveyed the carnage below. The planet Orvus III, once an Empire stronghold, was falling. The battle had raged for hours, but now EDF forces were storming the capital, the Empire's banners torn from their poles, the last pockets of resistance crumbling. He turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through to General Graves." A moment later, Graves' face appeared on the screen. "It's done," Holloway said simply. Graves nodded, his expression unreadable. "And Velker?" Holloway's jaw tightened. "Gone. Again." Velker had slipped through their fingers too many times. Graves exhaled slowly. "He's preparing something. I can feel it." Holloway leaned forward. "Then we hit the capital. End this war before he can act." The general was silent for a long moment, then gave a slow, decisive nod. "Prepare the fleets," Graves ordered. "We take the Imperial homeworld next." In the shadows of an unnamed system, Velker stood aboard a cloaked warship, watching the blue-green sphere of Earth rotating in the distance. Silent, untouched by war. For now. He turned to his second-in-command, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips. "Send the message," he said. "Let them know." A moment later, Earth's planetary defense network received an encrypted transmission. One that would send a chill through every human soul. A single image, flickering on every screen across Earth. A weapon. A planet killer. Its silhouette unmistakable against the black of space. Velker's voice followed, cold and measured. "You started this war, humans. But I will be the one to end it." The war had never been about survival. Now it was about who would be left standing when the galaxy burned. The stars above Imperial Prime, once the seat of galactic dominance, now bore witness to its last stand. The Earth Defense Fleet had arrived, a storm of warships cutting through the void with ruthless precision. Hundreds of vessels, sleek and lethal, advanced in coordinated formations. Humanity, underestimated for too long, had come not as diplomats, not as survivors, but as executioners. On the bridge of the Titan-class Dreadnought Vanguard, Admiral James Holloway stood like a statue, his gaze locked on the planet below. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped behind his back. The war had led them here, to the very heart of the Empire, and he would not let this moment slip into hesitation. A voice crackled over the comms. "General Alexander Graves." "Are we in position?" Graves asked. "Yes, sir," Holloway confirmed. "The blockade is set. No one is getting in or out." A pause. Then Graves exhaled. "Then we finished this." The transmission cut out. Holloway's gaze remained fixed on the planet below, watching as the Imperial fleet began to rise from their defensive formations. Dozens of warships, battered but unbroken, moved to intercept the EDF forces. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but Holloway knew they would fight to the last man. It would not be enough. "Launch the first wave," Holloway ordered. Across the fleet, missile silos slid open. their payloads locking onto targets. The order was given, and the void came alive with fire. A storm of destruction rained upon the Imperial forces, carving through enemy formations before they could react. The once mighty fleet of the Empire shattered beneath the relentless assault, their ships torn apart by Earth's war machine. The humans advanced, weaving through the wreckage of burning vessels. The EDF strike teams moved into position, ready to land on the surface and take the Imperial Palace itself. From deep within the city, hidden among the towering spires of Imperial Prime, Darthan Velker watched the sky burn. For the first time in his life, he felt something foreign curl inside his chest. Not fear. Never fear. Frustration. He turned sharply from the observation deck, his cloak billowing behind him as he strode toward the war room. Inside, his remaining officers were gathered around a flickering hologram of the battlefield. Their faces were grim, drenched in quiet horror. "We've lost 50% of the fleet," one officer stammered. "The humans, they're relentless." Velker's eyes narrowed. "Of course they are. We underestimated them." Silence fell across the room. Another officer, older, hardened, cleared his throat. "Sir, we must evacuate the High Chancellor. The city will not hold." Velker turned to him slowly. "The High Chancellor is dead," he said flatly. "He shot himself an hour ago." A ripple of shock passed through the room. "The fool saw the writing on the wall," Velker continued, voice smooth, measured. "He chose cowardice. We will not." He turned his attention to the hologram, the display flickering as new data poured in. The humans were on the ground, and they were coming for him. Through the smoke-choked streets of Imperial Prime, Commander Nathan Noah advanced with his Black Reapers, their exosuits gleaming under the blood-red sky. The battle had become a brutal street war. Imperial forces, now leaderless, fought with desperation rather than strategy. Noah moved like a predator, his rifle a bladed scalpel of precision. Each shot dropped a target, every movement calculated. The Reapers cut through the enemy ranks, their black armor making them shadows in the inferno. Noah barely noticed the burn in his muscles. He barely heard the gunfire, the screams. He barely saw the bodies falling around him. His mind was set on one thing: Velker. He pushed forward, tearing through Imperial resistance. His squad followed without hesitation, each soldier a weapon sharpened by vengeance. They reached the palace gates. Noah slammed his boot against the entrance panel. The reinforced doors buckled, then gave way. They stormed inside. Velker stood at the heart of the throne room, waiting. He had discarded his heavy armor, his weapons, everything but the blade at his side. His silver mask gleamed under the broken light of the shattered skylight above. The heavy doors burst open, and through them came the man he had been waiting for. Noah stepped forward, rifle still raised, his eyes burning. Velker smirked. "Ah," he murmured. "So you finally found me?" Noah said nothing. Velker tilted his head. "Did you enjoy your little war? Your crusade?" Noah's grip on his rifle tightened. Velker's smirk grew. "Tell me," he continued, voice like silk. "Does the boy's face still haunt you? When you close your eyes, do you see it?" Noah pulled the trigger. The first shot tore through Velker's shoulder, spinning him back. The second hit his knee, dropping him. Still, Velker laughed. "You humans," he whispered, blood trickling from his lips, "you think you've won." Noah stepped forward, pressing the barrel of his rifle against Velker's forehead. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "We didn't come here to win." Velker's breath hitched. "We came to end you." Noah pulled the trigger. From above, the Vanguard hovered over the capital, its guns trained on the city below. Admiral Holloway stood on the bridge, watching as the last Imperial strongholds fell one by one. A calm officer turned toward him. "Sir, the last resistance has been neutralized." Holloway nodded. "General Graves?" On his way to the surface now. Holloway turned to the viewport, watching as EDF forces raised the human banner over the shattered remains of the Imperial Palace. It was over. In the ruined throne room, General Graves stepped over the debris, his gaze falling on Velker's lifeless body. Noah stood nearby, silent, staring down at his fallen enemy. "You did good," Graves said, voice softer than usual. Noah didn't answer. He exhaled slowly, the weight of everything settling on his shoulders. Graves looked around, the destruction, the blood, the silence. "It's over," he murmured. Noah's fingers curled into fists. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." Graves studied him for a long moment, then nodded. They had won the war, but now they ruled the ashes. Months later, on a newly rebuilt Romagon, a statue stood at the colony center. Jimmy Leo, his face frozen in innocence, a reminder of why they had fought. Noah stood before it, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. A familiar voice spoke behind him. "You ever wonder if we did the right thing?" Holloway asked. Noah exhaled. "We did what had to be done." Holloway was quiet for a long moment. "So what happens now?" Noah didn't answer right away. He glanced up at the stars, the same ones Jimmy used to dream about. Then finally he spoke. "Now," his voice was calm, unwavering. "Now, the galaxy learns what it means to fear humanity.